Good morning, everybody. This is the men's Sunday school class here at Mercy Baptist Church. My name is Robert Rathbone, and we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 18. Looks like we'll be covering all 24 verses. And of course, I won't have time to dwell on each 12 very long on each verse, or else we'll never get through 24 verses. I learned that last week because we didn't get finished going through our chapter last week. But the Proverbs in this chapter, they're going to cover a variety of topics, such as the importance of how we use our tongue, cautions against putting our trust in our wealth, the dangers of being proud, the benefits of wisdom, the problems associated with fools, the value of friendship, and then, of course, other similar topics that'll be interspersed here among our verses. But before we get started, let's just go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you again for your love, your mercy, and grace, Father. Thank you, Lord, for your word that you've given us, Lord, to not only know the way of salvation, but Lord, to learn wisdom, Father, to help us in our day-by-day lives, Lord, to know the right way to go and how to live wise lives. So, Father, I pray as we look at these verses that you would just teach us, Father, what we need to see and what we need to learn, Father, for it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, that first verse, it says, through desire, a man having separated himself seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom. Of course, the word desire means longings, your wishes. It's the things that you want. And so it says, through desire, a man having separated himself. So this is a man who, because of the things that he wants, he's isolated himself apparently. It may not necessarily be like a hermit. Some people will become like a hermit, and they'll they don't want to be around other people. They just get off by themselves, and they want to not have other people meddling in their lives, I guess. It's through their desires. They want what they want, and they're not concerned. They don't want other people interfering with what they want to do, putting their expectations on them, or their the restraints, and saying, "Oh, well, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't do things this way or that way. You should get out more," or whatever. Anyway, so they could do it either physically like a hermit, or they may be doing it emotionally, or in practicality sense, they do their own thing, and they don't want other people talking to them. And I'm already doing like what I said I wouldn't do, not dwelling on each verse very long. So, but it's through desire, a man who has separated himself, he says, he seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom. The word intermeddleth there, the Hebrew word means to quarrel or to be in contention. So it's basically, he wants to separate himself, and anybody who tries to bring wisdom to him and say, well, you need to do things this way. And so they are going to quarrel, to be contentious. They're going to argue and resist all the wisdom. They seeketh wisdom so that they can argue against it and say, well, this is why I don't do that, because it's smarter if I do it this way. But it's all, the whole point of it is so they can fulfill their own desires, do what they want to do, because a lot of people don't want to be told what to do. To a certain degree, none of us want to be told what to do, but these people will separate themselves because they don't want to be told what to do. All right, and they'll argue against anybody that would try to teach them otherwise. All right, verse 2, it says, a fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. All right, and we've all talked to these people they'll come up to you and say, oh, well, what do you think about such and such? And it's not that they are interested in what you have to say. They want the opportunity to tell you what they think. And that's why he says, a fool hath no delight in understanding. He don't get into a conversation with you in order to gain, it's like, well, I want to get another perspective so maybe I can learn from it. He don't have light in that kind of understanding. He says, but his heart may discover itself. The word discover there means to reveal itself. In other words, he wants the opportunity to be able to tell you what he thinks, what's in his heart. He thinks he can tell you, he can educate you. And so that's the whole reason he struck up the conversation, was not to learn from you, but so that you could presumably learn from him. And that's a common theme through Proverbs, is that a fool thinks he already knows everything. He thinks he doesn't have to learn anything, and so it's his lot in life to educate everybody else. All right, verse 3, he says, when the wicked cometh, then cometh also contempt, and with ignominy, I know it's a hard word to say, and with ignominy reproach. All right, so he says, when the wicked cometh, that could be a wicked person or just wickedness in general. And he says, when that comes, when that arrives, he says, then also cometh contempt. The word contempt there means to despise or to consider insignificant. It's like if I hold you in contempt, I'm just saying, well, it doesn't matter what you think because you're not too smart, you're insignificant, so it doesn't matter what you think. And so he says, when wicked cometh, then also comes that attitude of contempt toward other people. Because they don't care. Wicked people don't care what you think, and they don't care about your well-being. They just care about accomplishing their wickedness. And then he says, and with ignominy, and that word means shame, disgrace, dishonor. And he says, with that, when that comes, he says, you're going to have reproach, and reproach means scorn. It's either the person, this shameful person, because of their wickedness or for whatever reason, they scorn other people, or else they invite scorn because the people who are wise, they look and say, well, why are they that way? Why are they so shameful? Why are they so disgraceful? And so I think the writer here which is probably Solomon, he's saying, look, wicked's always associated with contempt. Ignominy, the shame and reproach, is shame and disgrace is always associated with reproach. Apparently, you can't separate those. Verse 4, he says, the words of a man's mouth are as deep waters, and the wellspring of wisdom as a flowing brook. One thing I've discovered, I think, as I've been studying Proverbs, is a lot of times the first half of the verse can be interpreted you can get the context from the latter half of the verse. So when it says the words of a man's mouth, it's just not any man. I think he says the wellspring of wisdom is a flowing brook. So he's talking, the context is a wise man. So he says the words of a wise man's mouth are as deep waters. In other words, there's a lot to it. It goes deep. When a wise man talks, there's a lot there. It's not a shallow. It's not like a little shallow puddle of wisdom. It is deep waters. And he says, then the wellspring of wisdom is as a flowing brook. The wisdom that he has, it's like a flowing brook. It's a never-ending stream of water or of wisdom. And so the idea here is that we should always pay attention when a wise man is speaking, to listen and gain whatever kind of wisdom we can from that person, to listen to it, absorb it, and learn from it. Verse 5, he says, it is not good to accept the person of the wicked, to overthrow the righteous in judgment. All right, so this kind of puts it, well, I think and primarily it's probably thinking in terms of like you go into a courtroom and for a judge to show favoritism or to accept a person because maybe here's a rich and powerful person or somebody famous, and his opponent in the courtroom is maybe somebody that's unknown or doesn't have much money or whatever. He says you don't accept the person of the wicked. This person is a wicked person, but you don't accept him just because he's famous or that he has money or he's powerful, he has authority. He says it's not good to accept the person of the wicked, accept him just because of who he is. He says to overthrow the righteous in judgment. In other words, it should not be an occasion for a miscarriage of justice. Judges are to be impartial. They judge on what's right and what's wrong, not based on who it is that is in the courtroom or what their personal opinion is. I think today too many judges, if they don't like the one person and they do like another one or whatever, they allow that to sway their opinion. And rather than doing on the merits of the case, they'll let things go according to what they think of the person. If they don't like this person, particularly when it's in the case of like a famous person, there's too much them being biased toward the person that they like versus against the person that they don't like. And so here the writer here says, or Solomon says, it's not good to accept the person. You're not doing a good thing. You're not being a faithful judge. All right, verse 6, a fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. And in verse 7, I threw it in here with it. It says, a fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. All right, this is talking about the destructive effects of a fool's words, of what he says. Because it says a fool's lips enter into contention. Of course, contention is strife, fighting, arguing. And so this is a fool who can't keep his mouth shut. He is constantly talking, stirring up trouble, stirring up bad feelings. Because of what he's saying, he's either insulting people or just saying stuff he has no business saying, or it's just not true. So a fool's lips enter contention, and it says, and his mouth calleth for strokes. Now you can read this one of two ways, I guess. Either he is promoting violence. The strokes is like somebody's getting in a fight, wanting to hit someone, taking a stick or whatever. Strokes, or it could be being whipped, which was a punishment they had back then. But his mouth calleth for stroke. So he's either promoting violence or else he's inviting violence because he is making people so angry that they want to knock some sense into him or whatever. They want to just shut him up with their fist. And then it says a fool's mouth is his destruction. These people they don't know when to shut up. They keep talking and talking, making more and more people angry, stirring up strife and trouble and whatever. And it says, his lips are the snare of his soul. In other words, he gets himself in more trouble because of what he says, because of his mouth. Because he opens it when he shouldn't, and he doesn't close it when he should. So it's just he's just asking for trouble. And this is characterized. This kind of person is characterized as a fool. Verse 8, he says, the words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. Now, the word talebearer. Am I back? All right. Okay, feedback. All right. The word talebearer there, the Hebrew word means a slanderer or a backbiter. It's somebody that talks about you, that says bad things about you, that calls you names. And I know we say, we like to tell our kids, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. But words do harm. If we pay attention to them, we take them to heart, words can cut us deeply. And this is what he's saying here. He says the words of a talebearer are as wounds. He said they may not be inflicting a physical wound on you, but they cut deep. They can hurt you in the heart, especially if it's somebody that you have trusted. You've considered them to be a friend. You thought, well, I thought I could take care of this person. They've turned on me. They're saying all this stuff about me. And so he says the words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. It cuts. It goes down to the innermost parts of us. It's we would say the heart. They would say the belly, but like I guess is the center of the body. But it is. It cuts us deeply. Even though we would like to not admit that, but it does. When somebody talks bad about us, we don't like it. Verse 9, he says, he also that is slothful in his work is brother to him that is a great waster. The Hebrew word translated great waster, it refers to someone who destroys and lays waste to the land. Like an enemy army comes in and they just destroy everything in their path. And so he says, he that is slothful in his work. And so I think from the context, he's probably referring to someone who's working his land, because agriculture was probably one of the primary occupations back then. He's slothful in his work. In other words, he's not working his land as he should. He's letting things grow up and like the weeds and the trees or the bushes. He's not taking care of business. He's not working his land properly. And so he says, he that is slothful in his work, he's brother or related to or very closely almost the same thing as a great waster, somebody that comes in and destroys. He says, if you're not going to work your land properly, then you're pretty much doing the same thing that somebody that comes in and just destroys everything, or it's very close to being that, because you're just letting things grow up, letting things go back to wilderness, and you can kind of take that in a more general sense that whatever your line of work is, if you don't do your work properly, if you're being lazy about it, which is what the word slothful means, then you are very close to being somebody that just wants to come in and destroy everything or sabotage it or whatever. All right, moving on to verse 10. He says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. Verse 11, the rich man's wealth is his strong city, and as an high wall in his own conceit. All right, so here the writer's comparing the difference between where the righteous go for safety and what they trust in versus what the rich or the wicked what they trust in. It says the name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous runneth to it and is safe. The righteous will trust in the Lord. They realize, my salvation or my safety is not in my money or armies or anything like that. It's the Lord, and so they run to Him as if He was their strong tower. He says the righteous runneth into it and are safe. On the other hand, he says a rich man's wealth is his strong city. The rich man is trusting in his wealth to protect him, to keep him up. as if it was the strong city, with a high wall around it that would be protected from the enemy. They look at their wealth as being like that. And so because of their conceit of oh, I've got all this money, nobody can touch me, they're conceited in that sense, that they are trusting in their wealth rather than in the Lord. Verse 12, he says, before destruction, the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility. Now this is another occasion where the writer is talking about two different things, two pairs of things that are associated with each other. He says, before destruction, the heart of man is haughty. The word haughty means proud or arrogant. So he's saying the heart of man, if you see destruction, then you know before that happened, somebody was proud. They were confident in their own abilities, and those abilities were not enough, and that's where destruction came in. But then he says, before honor is humility. He says, you see someone who's being honored, well, you can count on it that they've already been humble. And so he's, the bottom line here, he's saying that pride will precede destruction and humility precedes honor. Verse 13 says, he that answereth a man before he heareth it, it is a folly and shame unto him. All right, so he's basically saying here that it's an embarrassment if you jump to conclusions, like if you answereth a matter, like you hear about something and you think you already know what the situation is, that you assume you already have all the facts. And so it says, he that answereth the matter before he heareth it, he says it's a folly or foolishness and a shame unto him. It's embarrassing because you already jump to a conclusion. You think, oh, well, that person did this, or he's guilty, or he's innocent, or whatever, and you don't really know because you don't know all the facts. Then when the facts do come out, people remember what you said before, and now you're embarrassed because you jump to conclusions, you prematurely pass judgment, and you was shown to how wrong you really were. Verse 14, he says, the spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? All right, the word infirmity there, the Hebrew word refers to a physical weakness. It could be an injury or it could be a sickness. And so somebody who's endured a physical injury or sickness can still be in good spirits. I mean, you could go to somebody they're laid up in hospital because they've got a broken leg or some ailment, and yet they can still be in good spirits, just happy, jovial. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I'm lucky it wasn't worse or whatever. I just come out of a car accident. At least I'm alive, or whatever. They can still be in good spirits. But he says a wounded spirit who can bear. He says if you've become discouraged, if you have an emotional injury and you could easily fall into depression, discouragement, and he says, you may not even have a physical injury, but when you're down and discouraged and depressed, he says, who can bear that? It's at least with a physical injury, you can still be in good spirits and still be happy and encouraged and go on. But if you're depressed, he says, who can handle that? How does that heal? Verse 15, he says, the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. All right, the heart of the prudent. A prudent person is a discerning. They're understanding. You could almost put in the word wise there, but he says the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge. In other words, he's always ready to learn something new, to get a different perspective, to accumulate the knowledge, because he understands he doesn't know everything. And it says, "In the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge." It's just the idea that A wise person doesn't assume that they know everything, that they are willing to listen and watch, observe, and accumulate whatever kind of knowledge they can get. If they can learn something from those around him or the situation, they will utilize that to learn more, so they can continue to be more wise. Verse 16, it says, "A man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him before great men." Now, at first blush, you might think, well, that sounds like bribery. But it's not bribery, but it's the courtesy of bringing a gift to show your respect to someone. He says, "A man's gift maketh room for him." A gift will open doors that would otherwise be closed to you. And it says, "And bringeth him before great men." I remember like when Solomon was king over Israel, there were men that came from other countries that would come to see Solomon, and they would bring gifts with them. It was a way to open the door to get Solomon to kind of grease the skids, you might say, so they could get an audience with Solomon and hear his wisdom and learn from him. And so here he's just saying, hey, if you want to, it makes it easier for you to see great men. It opens up a space. It makes room. In other words, it opens up a place for you that you would not ordinarily have access to if you bring a gift, because it causes the person to pay attention to you more. Where you're just a name, but he says, "Oh, but they brought this gift," and I was like, "Hey," he said, "Well, I got to talk to this person," and so it's a way to talk to great men, to powerful, influential people, is bring a gift. Verse 17: "He that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him." All right, so he says, he that is first in his own cause seemeth just. In other words, if you hear, these two people are against one another, and they're both telling you their story, and the first one gets to tell his story, and he sounds like, oh, well, he seems just. That the word means lawful or righteous. It sounds like you've heard his side of the story, and it sounds like, oh, well, he's the one that's in the right. But that's only until his neighbor, and this neighbor could be his opponent. It could be just somebody that lives near him, that knows him. He says, "But his neighbor cometh and searcheth him." And the word searcheth there, it means to examine or to explore. In other words, he takes what the first guy said and digs into it and says, well, he said this, but what he didn't tell you was this. And anyway, the idea is that the first one to tell you his side of the story, he'll sound good and sound like he's just, he's right, because he's only going to tell you the stuff that supports his side. But then you start hearing the other side of the story, and you start hearing all the stuff that he didn't tell you about. Then you start realizing, well, okay, that guy's not as righteous as he portrayed himself. Verse 18, "The lot causeth contentions to cease, and parteth between the mighty." All right, back in that day, casting lots, and I think we're not really sure what casting lots exactly was. It was some random chance thing. I mean, it's almost like us tossing a coin or throwing some dice or something. But the idea was, it was a way of making what they would consider to be a fair decision. Under Joshua, when they had finished fighting all the wars and getting all the Canaanites out of the land, and they were dividing up the land amongst all the tribes, you would use the lot to as a fair way, so that no tribe could say, well, you gave us this sorry piece of land or whatever, because the idea was that when you cast the lot, it was random chance, but God was the one who was controlling the outcome of the lot, and therefore it represented God's will. Proverbs 16:33 says, "For the lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. And so the idea was, if we cast a lot, you can't blame me for the outcome. You can't blame somebody else. It's God that's the one who controlled the outcome. Therefore, it was considered to be a fair and just way to decide something. And so he says, the lot causeth contentions to cease. In other words, people that were arguing, once you cast a lot and you say, okay, this is the way it's going to be, then they have to be quiet, because to continue to fight, it would be saying, well, God was unfair. God made a bad call in this situation. But it being a fair thing, it says it causes contentions to cease. I mean, it settles the matter, and it says, and it parteth between the mighty. They can part ways, the mighty, which would refer to kings and powerful people. He says they can part ways and be at peace with one another because the matter has been dealt with in a fair way. Verse 19, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. All right. A brother offended could be someone like a family member or a close friend, and they feel like they have been betrayed by someone they've trusted. And the pain of that betrayal has made it extremely difficult to regain their trust. So he says, a brother offended, it's harder to be won than a strong city. He says, look, it's easier to take a strong city, to conquer that, a strong city, than it is to try to resolve and get reconciled with a brother that you've offended in some way, because they have been, when you're been hurt by someone that you've trusted, it is hard to get over that. And so he says, and their contentions or their fightings, because they're going to resist, they're going to hold hard feelings for a long time. He says, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. He said it's like you want to get back to them and get their forgiveness and reconcile, but it's like facing the bars of a castle that you just can't get through. Verse 20, he says, a man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth, and with the increase of his lips shall he be filled. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. All right, so he says, a man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth, and the increase of his lips shall he be filled. You can get further along the proverb emphasizes the importance of speaking to others with grace and kindness. And so these things, like when you are on good terms with other people, then they're more willing to buy and sell, trade with you, so you can I guess, hire people to work your fields. Things just go smoother. If you have insulted people, and nobody's going to want to have anything to do with you, if you've talked bad to them. And so here, he says, a man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth. He's going to prosper better if he is talking to people in a good and kind way. Then he says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. That could mean the difference between death and life. You just never know when, if you have insulted somebody, how they're going to react to you. But he says, they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Those that recognize that the fruit of the tongue can bring life, then they're going to love it. They're going to take advantage of that. Okay, I'm closing in on the end, but I'm running out of time here. Verse 22, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor of the Lord. God created man, and then the Lord said, back in Genesis, he says, not good for man to be alone. And so he created a woman, and he intended for them to be married, to be together, for each other's benefit. And so here he says, whosoever findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth the favor of the Lord. The Lord is showing his favor by enabling them to find a wife, because the marriage relationship was made to God instituted in order to benefit both men and women. Verse 23, the poor useth entreaties, but the rich answereth roughly. The word entreaties means humble request. And so he says the poor, they know they're not in a position to make demands, and so they make humble requests. They say, do you mind if I do this, or can I have that? But the rich answereth roughly. It's like the rich think, well, I'm rich, I'm powerful, they're used to getting their way, and so when they don't get their way, they answer roughly. They're not concerned about being polite to other people, because they think, well, I'm rich, I get my way, they have no concern over being polite to other people, to being, what their words and what they do, how it affects other people. And so they make impatient demands. And then finally, verse 24, it says, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly. And there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. All right, so the first part, he says, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly. If a person that wants to have friends, they need to be friendly. There's no point in them expecting to have friends if they're not being friendly themselves, because nobody wants to be friends with somebody who's very unfriendly. And so he says, look, if you want, it's kind of the idea that you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, that type of idea. If you want to have friends, you better be a friendly person, because then you'll accumulate friends. And then he says, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. There's varying degrees of friendships. There's just acquaintances, people that you know, but you're not really friends with them. Then there's friends that you have some sort of a camaraderie with, but there's a limit to how close you are to them. Then there's your close friends, people that know you. They've come to your house. They know a lot about you, and many times they know more about you than even your own family members. And so he says, there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. Some of these people, these close friends, can be even more loyal than family members. And so here, this proverb is emphasizing the benefits of friendship. That if you want to have friends, you better be a friendly person. And one of the benefits of it is you can acquire a friend who is closer than a brother, closer than your own flesh and blood, and they will stick with you through thick and thin. They will have your back. And they are somebody that you can share, your concerns, because a lot of times, you want to sit down with your friend and tell them, well, this has been bothering me, or I'm having to deal with this or that, and but they are there for you. All right, that's the end of the chapter. So we are going to be, again, I don't remember. I've been working couple of chapters ahead. It's 22 or 24, but I forget. But we'll be in Proverbs again next week.